Coming up,
I was like, I must be funny.
actress Kim Whitley
I believe it's part of my journey.
going from mentor to mother in the span of about an hour.
No, they were like, your eggs is old, boo. You better go get this baby.
And then, an American imprisoned in Iran. Hear what brought him to the brink of suicide and what brought him back to life on today's 700 Club.
Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Startling report about what sugar does to your children and how you can fix it very, very quickly. You don't want to miss this report. But I think maybe the president's been watching this show. If not, maybe some advisors are starting to talk to him. But the question is, will he finally get serious about fighting the brutal terrorists of ISIS? Now, the Secretary of Defense says the United States is reconsidering its strategy against the radical Islamists, might launch military attacks against them in Iraq, and ordering a number of attack helicopters into the battle. Wendy?
That move comes as the U.S. and Russia have a new diplomatic partner, Iran. The Iranians will join the talks about fighting ISIS in Syria. Gary Lane has the story.
The U.S. shift in strategy was apparent at the U.S. State Department Tuesday when spokesman John Kirby announced the Islamic Republic of Iran is being invited to attend Syria peace talks in Vienna.
At some point in the discussion, moving towards a political transition, we'd have to have a conversation and a dialogue with Iran.
While Iran says it will attend the peace talks, Kirby made it clear the United States did not invite Iran, and the country is not a partner but a stakeholder in Syria. And Defense Secretary Ash Carter says U.S. troops will now be more involved in actual combat against ISIS, like the recent rescue operation in Iraq, when special forces joined with Kurdish Peshmerga troops.
We won't hold back from supporting capable partners in opportunistic attacks against ISIL.
Or conducting attacks directly from the air or on the ground, said Carter. The goal for now is to recapture Iraq's Anbar province and seize the ISIS capital city of Raqqa, Syria. And there's growing recognition that Syrian President Assad, now with active Russian combat help, will remain in power. The French are now considering reopening their embassy in Damascus. It was closed back in 2012. Is this a shift in Syria policy or a collapse? Senator Lindsey Graham says Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah are all acting to ensure Assad remains in power, and the Obama administration isn't doing anything to stop it.
He is secure as the day is long. So this is what's happened, folks. This strategy is completely falling apart.
Meanwhile, ISIS is spreading and unleashing its terror around the Islamic world. Afghanistan's national security advisor warns that Islamic State terrorists have become a serious threat in his country. And reports coming from the Middle East say Turkey and several Gulf states have transported 500 ISIS jihadists from Syria to Yemen to fight in the civil war there. And Turkey is tackling the Islamic State head on. They've launched a number of raids this week, killing 7 ISIS fighters and capturing 30 more. The stepped-up fighting has caused more civilians to flee. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees suggests the world is at the breaking point in handling the largest displacement of people since World War II. He says the United States, Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and others must come together to end the Syria war.
The question for me is, are the parties that are relevant to this conflict already convinced that the risks they all face are so big that they are more important than the differences among them or not? My sincere belief is that it is a suicide to let this war go on.
Gary Lane, CBN News.
Thanks, Gary. Ladies and gentlemen, we said it before, we say it now. What is ISIS? They're a bunch of ragtag people driving around in pickup trucks. They've stolen a number of pieces of U.S. ordnance that we gave to the Iraqis, but nevertheless, they're ill-equipped. But they're getting more and more money. They're getting money from oil revenues. They're getting money from kidnapping. They're getting money from drug smuggling. They're getting money from all those things. Now, could we wipe them out? I think 2 months would be all it would take, with a reinforced combat brigade or maybe 2 U.S. divisions. Supported by massive helicopter and other air power, with the ordnance we have available to us, and working with our very brave Peshmerga allies. There may be others, the Turks, who would come in on it with us. We could wipe out ISIS in a matter of 2 months, but the president has dithered and dallied because of politics. We run these wars on the basis of domestic politics. He's made a few promises to his left-wing political allies, and he wants to keep those promises. Well, we're not going to have any combat forces. Well, we need them, and we ought to get it over with. And this thing is going to be a cancer that's going to grow and metastasize, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. We even understand that they would be moving into Saudi Arabia. They've got forces in Yemen, and the Saudis have got forces in Yemen. And one of these days, this thing's going to explode into a major, major war, especially if Iran has the bomb. And yet, despite the fact that Iran is cheating on everything they've promised, and they're sticking their finger right in our eye, we're opening the door and say, well, let's bring them in as partners in peace and a peace negotiation. This is nonsense, but we're doing it. Maybe they're getting some wisdom up there. Ash Carter seems to be a pretty sharp guy, and maybe he'll start taking some authority in the Pentagon. Well, in other news, the economy and religious freedom will be just two of the hot topics tonight in the latest Republican presidential debate. George Thomas has that story from the CBN newsroom. Here's George.
Thanks, Pat. Hello, everyone. Well, it is expected to be another fiery, wild night as the Republican presidential candidates get together in Boulder, Colorado this evening for their third debate. David Brody brings us this preview from the Mountain West.
This presidential soap opera has clearly been entertaining and surprising. The latest turn, a new CBS New York Times national poll shows Ben Carson overtaking Donald Trump as the GOP frontrunner. The billionaire is scratching his head.
Trump losing in polls to Carson. Carson. I don't think Carson's going to negotiate really well with China, folks, in all fairness. Okay? I don't think so. And I like him. I don't think so.
Expect some Trump jabs Wednesday night. As for the doctor, Carson told CBN News he's hoping voters will see what he represents.
Well, I hope that they will look at my life, look at the entirety of my life, and see that it has been dedicated to the uplifting of people by leading a life that's not full of scandal and adhering to the values and principles of our Judeo-Christian foundation.
Carson's not the only candidate who's relying on faith to help his case. Ted Cruz believes he will eventually move higher, and he tells CBN News the reason why.
I'm the only one on that stage who has a record of standing up to Washington over and over again, defending the Constitution, defending liberty, defending religious liberty. And I think that's why we're seeing such incredible enthusiasm among the grassroots.
Cruz, Carson, Trump, and others want to strike gold with the key evangelical voting bloc. While this debate could begin to show movement, strategist Ralph Reed doesn't expect any tidal waves.
This idea that there's going to be a coalescing behind one candidate, that's a myth. That's not going to happen, number one. The evangelical community is very vibrant, it's not monolithic, and it doesn't march to a single drummer, and it's not easy to command.
This debate here in Colorado is mostly going to center on the economy, and that's going to give Ohio Governor John Kasich and former Florida Governor Jeb Bush a chance to tout their economic records. Bush will take the opportunity to lay out his just-announced entitlement reform plan, a subject he spoke about Friday at Regent University.
My belief is that once you reach 67, or 66 now, but ultimately 67, you should have to, your payroll tax as an employee, you should keep it. Because that's the way you're going to save money more directly and be able to live a life of independence.
Just one of the topics on tap for what is expected to be yet another night of presidential must-see TV. David Brody, CBN News, in Boulder, Colorado.
Thanks, David. Taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood could be a major issue next year if a Republican does win the presidential election. And now the Center for Medical Progress has released a new video from their investigation into Planned Parenthood's harvesting of the body parts of unborn babies. The latest video shows a Planned Parenthood doctor apparently describing a partial birth abortion procedure to terminate living late-term babies, the practice that's illegal under federal law.
So usually what I do is if it's a breech presentation, I'll remove the extremities first, the lower extremities, and then go for the spine and sort of break it down that way.
Dr. Darmish in the video also admits she's striving to harvest brain tissue.
I haven't been able to do that yet.
Oh, to get the calvarium?
Intact.
That's like maybe next time.
I know, right? Well, this will give me something to strive for.
By the way, Congress is currently investigating Planned Parenthood. Republicans on a congressional committee have moved to impeach the head of the Internal Revenue Service. The chairman of the House Oversight Committee says the IRS chief violated the public trust and obstructed congressional investigations into the IRS abuse of conservative groups. Representative Jason Chaffetz says impeachment is an appropriate tool to restore public confidence in the IRS. This comes after the Justice Department said no IRS official would face criminal charges. Conservatives blasted the Justice Department for not taking any action. Pat, is this a good idea, or do you think this will potentially backfire on the Republicans?
No, it won't backfire. I think the American people are sick of the IRS and the way they've misbehaved. And the fact that, you see, the Justice Department reports to Obama, and Obama is not going to investigate himself. And this is where it comes down to the fact that they're not going to come after Lois Lerner, despite all the things that she did. She lied under oath, she took the Fifth Amendment, she did all these things. And nevertheless, nobody is touching her. She's probably still getting her pay. I don't know, she got most of it during this period of investigation. So the head of the IRS should be impeached, but will they do it? It's not as hard to impeach a guy like this as it would be a sitting president. That isn't ever going to happen. But in this case, maybe. But it's one of those fights you just as soon not get into if you didn't have to. Well, we told you we had a good story for you, and this is a story that could make life better for you and your children. George.
That's right, Pat. Getting your kids to cut back on added sugars in their food would show immediate health benefits, including better cholesterol readings and blood pressure, along with a host of other improvements. And they could happen, by the way, in as little as 9 to 10 days. That's the finding from a new study financed by the National Institutes of Health. The study replaced foods with added sugars in children's diets with food that included other carbohydrates instead. The kids ate basically the same amount of calories, and they saw remarkable improvements in just 10 days. Some have argued that added sugars, like artificial sweeteners, increase the risk for serious diseases. Pat, another indication that sugar is metabolically harmful for you.
It is deadly. We've talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. You know,
you realize, though, that Halloween is just a couple days away, and the kids are going to be consuming a lot of sugar.
High. I mean, they'll load up those little baskets and they'll be gorging on sugar. Oh, man. But, you know, look at those sugar. Read the labels. I took a label on an additive. It was a meat additive, you know, for making a particular beef dish. Mm-hmm. And this was a hamburger helper. And so I took the label. And it said monosodium glutamate, MSG. Then it said it's got
high fructose?
High fructose, well, it's got that, but also it had all these trans fats, you know, hydrogenated this and hydrogenated the other. And there were several kinds of trans fats. So you're looking at carcinogens, you're looking at hyping your blood pressure and all that, and it's clearly on the label, but if you don't read the label, it's not going to help you. But you read the label on these cereals that are given to kids, and the first thing that pops up is sugar, then it's high fructose corn syrup. And now they're finding that many of the the artificial sweeteners have a chemical problem for you, and that includes NutraSweet and some of the others. The only one that I think is any good is stevia, which is plant-based and seems to work.
But at least it's scientific now, because they're showing that kids perform better after just 9 or 10 days. But you know what's so, we would all perform better probably.
Yeah, well, I want little Johnny to eat his breakfast, and so little Johnny, I'm going to give you a Happy Meal, and I'm going to give you Fruit Loops, and I'm going to give you all this sugar stuff, Sugar Pops, and
it backfires, you go up and then you crash.
Well, it's time we do something about it, but the big food companies, they want to sell cereal, and cereal is sold when the little kids eat it. Yeah. So that's the way it is. So let's get smart about this.
All right. Well,
All
up next, actress Kim Whitley lands the role of a lifetime.
I don't know how all this happened. It was supposed to happen. My whole life, I believe, is by divine order.
See what it's like to be raising Whitley next.
Hey, I'm delighted to have you with us. Wendy's here with us. We're going to have a great morning. You're going to have a great time together, and we'll get you all set for that Republican debate in case you like to get bored. Okay. No, I say it's must see. Did you watch it?
I watched the last one.
Did you watch it?
I mean, yeah, you got to watch it.
You got.
Because we're still deciding.
That's right.
You know, we're still
it's
deciding.
fairly interesting. They've got an interesting cast of characters. But anyhow, she's an actress, comedian, who has appeared in numerous movies and TV shows. But Kim Whitley says her proudest role is one only God could have prepared her to handle. And she hopes her life will inspire others to do more to help what Jesus called the least of these. What a story. Ephraim Graham shows how the actress became a mother in only 1 hour.
Los Angeles is home to nearly 4 million people. A good number of them came with dreams of making it big in Hollywood.
May I remind you that I told you to go tell Gabby how you feel.
Actress and comedian Kim Whitley shared those dreams.
I knew I was funny the first time I got a check. The first time I got paid for it, I was like, I must be funny.
That confidence came early. Kim's parents encouraged it, and she took it with her after she graduated from college and moved to Tinseltown with only $50 to her name. It's taken years to land more than 40 film and 40 television appearances, but Kim doesn't call it hard.
Hard is relative. What's hard? I look at other people's lives, their life, that might be hard. For me, if I want to be the spoiled brat, no, yeah, me trying to make it. Ooh, so what? I had to get on food stamps for a minute. So what? I had to do some jobs I wasn't comfortable with. No, it wasn't hard. I believe it's part of my journey.
Her Hollywood journey began as a substitute teacher in Compton. It's a working class city with a troubled history and known as the birthplace of gangster rap.
As I was teaching, I would find one student or two students, the parents would say, hey, can you teach my child how to read over the summer? My little girl, she's out of hand. She's not listening to me. I don't know where she's going to end up. And then I would take that little girl. So it started then.
That Compton connection moved Kim Whitley to invite young people to her home to mentor them. It was something her mother did when she was just a child. Kim even rallied her fellow comedians to help with something she called Comics for Kids. They hosted a sleepover where they gave each child the most popular thing to have at that time, a Sony Walkman.
I got an email some years later, and I couldn't even believe it. And it was like, hi, Miss Whitley, this is Eric, and I just wanted to let you know that the one night we spent at your house changed me and my brother's life. I was like, what? He said, I just want you to know that you gave us our Walkman, that we cherished it every day, but we both went to college and completed college because of you. You showed us a better way. Oof. And they said, it's so emotional, but I couldn't even believe that one night impacted these two little foster kids. And they were like, thank you, and please keep doing that. That girl has feelings for you.
Even while juggling multiple television series, success only increases Kim's drive to help.
My whole life, that people don't know because I'm so crazy, my whole life, I believe, is by divine order.
Kim's mentoring days took an unexpected turn a few years ago when her phone rang. There was a hospital nurse on the other end. And within just 1 hour of that phone call, the comedian went from mentor to mother. Meet Joshua.
One girl in particular I've been mentoring for maybe 15 years. And and she had gone into the hospital to deliver a baby. And the social worker says, the birth mother has chosen you as the guardian for this baby. When that opportunity came, I was fearful and I had chills all over my body. I was like, I can't take a kid. I mean, I can take a puppy, but not a kid. But my parents were in town, and my mom and dad literally were like, okay, baby girl, why don't you go get this baby? This is truly your last chance at happiness. What? No, they were like, you don't have a man. Doesn't look like you got one coming. Your eggs is old, boo. You better go get this baby.
This is crazy. This is the baby.
Home video documents Joshua's arrival. Unexpected, but no accident.
And I tell you this, the reason why this was divine, one of many reasons, was he came at a time when my parents were in town. They're never in Los Angeles. They were there for a period of 2 weeks. They've never stayed past a week. Then they said, we'll stay for a month. Then they stayed for 3 months because they were worried I was going to kill the baby. Okay, I didn't know how to bathe the baby or change the diaper, so they stayed with me. But 6 months later, my mother passed. How could that be planned? The time I spent with my mother and this baby.
Kim's unscripted journey from mentor to motherhood.
Where's my side?
You get one shelf.
Is the subject of a hit reality television series called Raising Whitley on Oprah Winfrey's network.
It's a little lumpy. What's wrong? No, pancakes are supposed to be lumpy. If I'm going to put my life and my son's life out for public display, it has to be to help people. So that was the decision, that I was safe and this would be a show that will help and bring laughter and hopefully some lessons.
Lessons from a life Kim never really imagined, and a son
Like bad guys.
Okay.
Kim can't imagine living without.
I don't know how all this happened. It was supposed to happen. From charity work to a child to a great show, great career. Divine order.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News, Baltimore, Maryland.
Isn't that sweet? Well, Kim Whitley's docu-series called Raising Whitley returns to the Oprah Winfrey Network, OWN, on November the 21st. And for more information, you can log on to the cbnnews.com and get more about it. But isn't that sweet?
Great story. Shows you how quick your life can change in 1 hour.
Well, whoever heard you get a telephone call, next thing you know, you got a baby boy. I mean, that's kind of, out of sight.
He's adorable,
I
too.
loved it. I mean, you haven't got a man and your eggs are old. She is wonderful. All right, what's next?
Funny. Well, coming up, a missionary who was sentenced to die after being falsely accused of spying in Iran. And that wasn't his only brush with death. He'll tell us how he survived through these ordeals when we come back. Dan Baumann is no stranger to death. After all, he faced it head-on in the mountains of Afghanistan and in the prisons of Iran. So what saved his life? You're about to find out.
Dan Baumann has traveled around the world sharing the gospel with Muslims for over 25 years. His travels have taken him to Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, in some of the most dangerous places in the world. In 1997, while on a 2-week trip in Iran, Dan was thrown into a high-security prison. He endured torture, beatings, and even contemplated suicide. What happened next was nothing short of a miracle. In his book, A Fresh Look at Fear, Dan shares from his own experiences with fear that even the most frightening areas of your life can be put into perspective with God's love.
And Dan Baumann is here with us now. Dan, welcome to the 700 Club.
Thank
Good to see you.
It's good to be with you.
Well, we featured your story a while ago, but for those of us who aren't familiar with it, let's start at the very beginning. How did you get arrested in Iran?
It was a few years ago where I was living in a neighboring nation named Turkmenistan, and me and my friend were wondering what to do over Christmas break. And long story short, we were able to get visas into Iran. We had an interest to go and share the love of Jesus there. I had lived for 10 years in Afghanistan, so that part of the world was very familiar to me. And after a wonderful 2 weeks in the nation of Iran, that's when everything changed. We got to the border and they took our passports away and they ended up putting us in prison in Iran.
And you described those early days in prison there as an all-time, your faith was at an all-time low. How so?
It was the worst time of my life. I'm not a good prisoner. I was full of fear, full of doubts. God seemed far away.
Yeah.
I shook a lot. I struggled a lot with, okay, God loves me, then why am I here?
Yeah.
And that led me to great moments of depression. And this was very much a big part of my story.
And at one point, I don't know how many days in, but you actually thought suicide was your only way out, and you were trying to drown yourself?
Yeah, it was about 3 weeks in where I woke up one day and I thought, if I'm going to spend the rest of my life here, why not check out?
Wow.
There was a sink in the room, and I knew if I filled it up and if I put my head in, they had given me a towel, and if I tied that towel on one end and then put the towel over my head and then tied it on the other side, that 4 or 5 minutes later, when I would start to gag, I wouldn't be able to jerk my head out.
Oh my gosh.
And 4 times I tried, and every time I tried, I was too scared.
And you had a vision during one of these times.
Yeah.
What did you see?
It was the 4th time as I tried and again failed, and that's when I popped my head out of the water. And if I've ever was broken in my life, if I ever was full of shame, I fell to the ground, and yet it was at that moment that a bright light filled the room, and I lifted my head from the dirt, and I saw a vision of Jesus. And his face was there, and his countenance, and the love from his eyes, and the mercy that I could see in his eyes. And then his hands came out like this, and I heard these simple words coming from him: Dan, I love you, and I promise to carry you through this time.
Wow. And that changed everything.
It changed everything. At my greatest low, not only of being in prison, but at my greatest moment of weakness, Jesus was there, and he was able to help me.
Well, did the beatings stop? Did anything else change, or were you still, you were still suffering after that?
Yeah, they did continue. I was beaten almost every day. I had 2 death sentences on my life. And so life was definitely hard, but I knew that Jesus was with me, and that gave me hope.
And what was your crime, so to speak? What were they accusing you of?
I had 2 death sentences. Both were pretty much unofficial. One was for being a spy for the U.S. government, and then also for being a missionary for talking about Jesus.
Of course, you were guilty of the second one, right?
Yes, I was.
Being in that prison, that wasn't your only near-death experience. You had, a few years ago, you were hiking in Afghanistan. And Dan, I love to hike it. I got to question your wisdom going hiking in Afghanistan. Aren't there wars and isn't it very dangerous? First of all.
Yeah, there is. I lived there for 10 years, and I worked in a hospital. And part of our desire and longing was to get eye care to the farthest villages. And it was in the northeast of the country on one of those trips that we were going with eye care and to provide a clinic is when I tripped and I fell and I was sliding off the face of a mountain.
And it was at a 500-foot drop.
Yeah, I was sliding, trying to stop myself. And when I finally looked down, I was facing a 500-foot drop at the edge. Yeah, definitely going towards my death.
What saved you from falling?
It was a very last-minute moment as I came to that edge. In one last scream, I remember wiping my hand against the rock, screaming Jesus. And in my hand, something came and it jerked me, and I started swinging instead of falling. And I remember at that moment, I found a place where I could stick this hand. I'd been looking for cracks. I hadn't found anything. And as I was able to grip my hand, I looked, and inside I found 2 blades of grass and a tiny twig. And as I was astounded that there's no way that could hold a human, I knew that.
I mean, you're a pretty tall guy and pretty fit. I don't see how those blades of grass.
Yeah, it was a complete miracle that God did.
And you found out later that there was someone on the other side of the world praying for you at that moment, asking for protection.
Yeah, it was 3 years later where a Brazilian friend of mine found me, and she showed me in her journal that at that exact moment when I'm falling off the cliff, she's sleeping in Brazil. And the Holy Spirit woke her up and said, pray right now for Dan, for angels to save his life.
Amazing. Well, you've written a book called A Fresh Look at Fear because you've kind of gone through the worst. Does anything scare you anymore?
I still struggle with fear, but really the main thing...
Being on live television?
Oh, man. But the main thing is that how good Jesus is,
well,
you know?
You speak a lot, Dan, and people come up to you and basically say fear is one of my biggest problems. What do you say to those folks?
Well, it's simply this. In my journey of trying to get over fear, is getting rid of fear our ultimate goal? And we have to say, well, no. What we want is peace, joy, contentment, and getting rid of fear is how to get it. Is it the only way how to get it? And my story is really one of finding Jesus. And when you find Jesus and you find the power of God, you actually find what you're looking for. And in that, you're going to see your fears slowly fade away.
So really, confessing your weakness, confessing your fear can bring you closer to the Lord, as it did for you.
Definitely, you know. And yeah, in my moments of fear throughout my life, I've ran to Jesus. And getting to know Jesus, I found something amazing. And it makes me wonder, maybe fear is maybe even an invitation to get to know God.
Back to the prison cell. How long did you stay there, and why did they finally let you go?
I was there for 9 weeks. It was supposed to be either the rest of my life or the death sentence. And I'm a dual citizen. My father is Swiss. I'm a Swiss American. And it was the Swiss government that had an embassy in Tehran, and they were able to negotiate my release. And it was a complete miracle I got out.
Yeah. So hiking in Afghanistan, I'm curious. Good hiking, good mountains there?
Excellent. Just watch out for the mines.
So you're still a missionary with YWAM?
Yes, I've been with YWAM for 28 years. I travel half the year speaking and teaching, and the other half of the year I'm at our main training center in Kona, Hawaii.
All right. Well, Dan, thanks for sharing your story with us and about a fresh look at fear. And you can get more of Daniel's insight in his book. It's available wherever books are sold. Back to you, Pat.
Man, that is fascinating. Well, we've got something else fascinating. We got a woman who endured years of abuse at the hands of Muslims. And now she's fighting back in a way she never thought was possible. Hear her story later on the 700 Club.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 700 Club. Members of Congress are weighing in on the case of a Washington State football coach under fire for praying after games. Two Republicans, Virginia Congressman Randy Forbes and Oklahoma Senator James Langford, led 47 members of Congress in a letter to the Bremerton School District supporting Coach Joe Kennedy. The school board has told him if he doesn't stop his tradition of praying, he could be fired. His lawyer says it's good to have the support from the congressman, and that Coach Kennedy plans to treat this Friday like any other, praying on the field after games like he has done since 2008. Congressman Dana Rohrabacher warns Christians are facing genocide in the Middle East. At a hearing Tuesday for the global crisis of religious freedom, the California Republicans said ISIS is targeting Christians for extinction. Rohrabacher says the U.S. needs to be a safe haven for persecuted believers. You can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website, cbnnews.com. Pat and Wendy will be back with more of the 700 Club right after this.
To see this week's most viewed stories, go to cbn.com.
Isik Abla had spent her life as a punching bag for her Islamic tormentors. At the age of 28, she was twice divorced and failing miserably at life. That's when Isik planned a permanent escape from her problems. She was going to commit suicide.
When I was 4 or 5 years old, I had a dream about Jesus. And he said, "Don't be afraid of death. You are going to have an eternal life." Ben Isik Abla, bu benim hikayem. My father was a womanizer, and my mother used to have nervous breakdowns. Every time she found out about his affairs, she used to just fall apart. And every time they had a fight, slamming the doors, cursing each other, I used to hide. And then when they used to see me, they used to tell me, "It's all your fault. I wish you have never been born." I remember being beaten up, kicked on the floors. I believed I was stupid. I believed I was ugly. I felt very filthy, and I felt like it was my fault. I studied a lot. I read everything I could find. I started learning Quran from my great-grandmother and tried to learn and be a good Muslim. So I thought it was fascinating that there was a being who created me. And if I knew him and if I find him, he could change my misery. I knew that I needed a miracle, but I had no relationship with my God. I prayed 5 times a day. I never heard back from him. So I came to a conclusion, there was God, there was a creator, but he was mean and hateful and always angry. I met this guy at college. He was a fanatical Muslim. I really believed he loved me. We got married. He started beating me up all the time, every other day. He used to kick me, spit on me, slap me in public, pull my hair. And I used to always find a fault in me. But then I started finding a relief at workplace. People started telling me I was smart. And I started climbing career ladders in Turkey. The more I became powerful at workplace, the more he abused me to keep me oppressed. One night, he put a knife on my throat and he told me to jump from the 8th floor of a building. I knew that even in the Quran, he didn't have a right to kill me. I decided I'm going to leave. I wanted freedom. I thought America is a free country. I want freedom. I got my divorce degree Friday and I graduated from my post-studies in business administration Saturday, and I fled to America on Sunday. But it didn't change. It doesn't matter. Wherever you go, you take you with you. And I took abused, hurt, insecure, angry, hateful, miserable woman with me to America. I said, I need a husband to tell me what to do with my life. And this time I met a drug abuser. And we had a child. Another type of depression and misery started. This wasn't physical abuse, but verbal abuse. And I decided to leave him. I was 28 years old, divorced twice, single mother, failed in every areas of my life. I became, that time, suicidal. I was working at a Christian company, and I had a Christian boss. He was really in love with Jesus. It was hard to understand how someone could be in love so much with his God. I didn't want to be a Christian. We called Christians infidels. They worshiped 3 gods. They called Jesus the prophet, Son of God, blasphemy. So now I am more miserable because I see people, they have peace in their lives and they talk to their God. Their God talks to them. And I said, life is not worth living. I am not good for this life and God hates me. And I decided to end my life that day. I went to work and I went to the restroom. I started having a disclosure with God. And I started telling him, why do you hate me? What have I done so bad to deserve this? I knocked on the counter and I said, here I am, I'm knocking at your door. Are you going to open the door? And I cleaned my face. I went back to my office. Then my boss called me. He said, please close the door and have a seat. And he said to me, I know this is going to sound very weird to you, but I have to be obedient. My Lord Jesus just spoke to me and he told me about what you are planning. And he wants me to tell you. You are not forsaken or abandoned. When you were abused, Jesus was by your side. He loves you so much. And he wants to be the center of your life. I went on my face to the floor and I started weeping bitterly and I said, yes, yes, Jesus. One single yes brought me to Jesus Christ. I felt freedom first time in my life. The freedom that I dreamed all my life was real. God always tells me, you are a new creation. You are crucified. It is all gone. Only I live in you. Only this moment. And the future I prepared for you is important. I can thank Him for who I am right now and who I am going to be. Ben Isik Abla, iyileştim, şifamı aldım ve özgürüm.
She is a powerful speaker, powerful teacher, and an anointed servant of the Lord. It's just simply amazing. But what she went through is beyond belief. Beaten every day by her husband, beaten and kicked and abused and cursed and put down. How she's maintained that joyous spirit, only God Himself knows. But she did, and Jesus had a plan for her, and that plan's being unfolded. So if you want to learn more about it, she was a victim of Islam. It was Islam that told her husband it was okay to abuse his wife. You can beat your wife in Islam. The husband has the power over the wife, and he can beat her if that's what his pleasure is. And her husband, drunk or whatever he was doing, just beat the daylights out of her. She suffered. She was bruised. She was wounded. We have a little booklet that is so excellent. It's called Islam, Religion of Peace or War. We have experts on Islam who have contributed to this book, and it's not a long one, but it'll tell you about the origins of Islam, the early life of Muhammad, and some of the core tenets of Islam from the Quran and from the Hadith. We'll give it to you free. If you remember that Islam, 1-800-759-0700. And if you want further prayer, you want help in any way, shape, or form, just pick up the phone. We're here for you. Wendy, what you got?
All right, thanks, Pat. Well, coming up, we've got your email questions. Stacy says, I go to church, but I refuse to attend any of the other activities because I've been hurt by many people there. Is this okay? Another round of Bring It On is right around the corner. Stay with us. If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And as Dan Rainey found out, if you teach a group of women how to grow mushrooms, you can feed a village and break the cycle of poverty.
Down a winding path at the bottom of a hill in rural Guatemala, I met Fidelina and her family. She lives with her husband, their 3 children, and her husband's grandparents.
My husband works on a chicken farm, but the money he makes is not enough to support the family, so I have been trying to figure out how to make some extra money.
Sometimes I ask my mom if there is any food left because I am still hungry. She says I should content myself with what we have because there is no more.
Wilmer is not doing very well in school. His teacher told me he needs vitamins to help him focus.
Recently, CBN started an innovative new mushroom farming program here in Chimantalango. The process is simple. Corn cobs are brought in, broken apart, and boiled to kill any bacteria or fungus. Then they're ground and bagged with mushroom spores. Add water, and in a few weeks, a family is ready to harvest its first crop.
What I love about this project is that these ladies are taking a byproduct, corn cobs, and they're using it to feed their families and to have a side business too.
The women in the village wanted to make me some of their famous mushroom soup, but first we had to make some tortillas to go with it.
Okay, I'm starting over.
In spite of my lack of tortilla making skills, lunch turned out great, and the mushroom soup was delicious. All the moms said their kids love it, and they love knowing that mushrooms are a good source of vitamins, nutrients, and protein.
I like mushroom soup very much, and it fills me up. No more hunger.
This mushroom business has made me very happy. I feel so grateful. I know that this business will help my family in many different ways. Thank you, CBN. May God bless you.
Isn't that amazing? A whole cycle of poverty broken because of mushrooms and because of you. Without you, none of this would have happened. Well, if you'd like to be a part of what God is doing around the world, it's so easy, and we need your help. We can't do it without you. Just say, yes, I want to join the 700 Club. The number right there on your screen, or you can log on to cbn.com. It's just 65 cents a day. $20 a month to change so many lives. And when you do that, we want to bless you with Pat's new teaching called The Transforming Word. These are verses to overcome fear and experience the peace of God. We'll rush this to you when you give us a call right now. And
Amen.
Guess what?
Time for questions. What a surprise.
All right. Well, Michelle says, I would describe myself as a mature Christian. I'm in the Word daily, live in line with the statutes to the best of my ability, and have repented of my insecurities. I grew up in an abusive home environment and have had many losses as an adult in relationships and in my health. Despite my best efforts to fix my eyes on Jesus and abide in Him, I still struggle with believing He loves me. I'm in my mid-40s and battle shame on a consistent basis. Why is this so hard? Shouldn't knowing and experiencing His love be something more accessible?
You know, you've got to die. Apostle Paul said, of a truth I lie not, I die daily. There has to be a death, and you're still holding on. You know, the idea of I'm self-conscious, I'm shy, I'm fearful, all that stuff, it has to do with self. You know, I'm concerned about me more than anything else. It's when you begin to look at Jesus and forget about yourself, and that thing has got to die. And I mean, it's hard. You literally need to put it to death. And out of that comes newness of life. It's like, you know, a seed. A seed falls in the ground, it dies, and out comes this beautiful plant. Well, that's the same thing with you. Your old life is buried with Christ. It's raised in Him with newness of life. And you haven't given up the old life yet. It just isn't there. You say, well, I'm this and I'm that. But a lot of that is works. You're working, you're working, you're working. And what you need to do is relax and enjoy the Lord and say, look, I am yours. All that raw stuff is gone. Let it go. Turn it loose. It's like an old stinking carcass hanging on to you. You need to kick that off and put it in the grave and come up to the life God wants you to be in. All right?
Amen. Stacy says, hey, Pat, I go to church but won't attend any church activities. Is that okay that I refuse to go to any activities? I've been hurt before by people in the church, so I've learned to keep my distance.
Well, that's sort of like the answer to that first question. It's the same thing. You've got a big self problem, and you don't trust people. You've got to trust people. You have to love people, you know? And when you forget about yourself, if you concentrated on people in those groups, how can I help them? And suddenly, you've transformed yourself from being a victim that's being put upon by others to an active agent of transformation. That's what we are. If we are, once you become a transforming agent, then you have a different life. But your question was, do you go to heaven if you don't go to the potluck suppers? You better believe it. I tell you what, I started really losing it at church suppers when I was working at a church in downtown Norfolk. Those suppers were awful. There wasn't anything worth eating. A cold piece of beef and a lot of gravy and a lot of white potatoes and a lot of, you know, pastry. And you eat that stuff and it doesn't satisfy. And that was a church supper. So you don't have to go to potluck suppers. You don't have to go to the youth group or all that stuff. That's not necessary for salvation. But at the same time, think of yourself as wherever I go, I'm an agent of transformation. Let that be in your head. I am going to transform the situation. I am in charge because I'm going to transform it. Watch what happens. Okay.
That's good. All right. Ronald says, a message at church involved the rich young ruler, and he had to sell all he had and give it to the poor to be saved. Is that really required to be saved? I do give my 10%, but not all of my money and my belongings. I knew early in life I did not like being poor like my parents. So at about 29, I started saving $40 a week. I left church feeling guilty and unsure of my salvation. I don't want to be cold and hungry when I'm elderly.
Oh, you're not trusting the Lord. The truth of the matter is, no, the rich young ruler, he was absorbed with his money, and that was his God, and an idol, and it had become an idol, and he had to surrender that idol if he was going to get saved. But it doesn't mean that every one of us has got to give up all of our money. That's not the case. But at the same time, 100% of what we have belongs to God. We're stewards of that. And if he wants us to keep 90% and give away 10, that's cool. If he says give away 50 and keep 50, if he says keep 10 and give away 90, you got to be prepared to be responsive to it. And you're holding on to it just like the rich young mover. Don't worry about it. God knows how to multiply. There was a time I had in my life, it was the end of the year, and I was figuring out stuff, and I wanted to give a particular amount of money, a particular percentage of income. And in order to do that, I had to give away, at that time, I had to write a check for $73,000. And I wrote a check for $73,000 and completely cleaned me out. Wow. That was it. Wow. I had no money. I gave it all away. Okay. Within a matter of a couple of months, a couple of weeks actually, I got a check for over 12 times what I had given away. And it was just out of the clear blue sky. And, you know, that's what God will do. So don't be afraid to give.
Wow.
All right, we'll leave you with today's Power Minute from Proverbs 1:30-something or other. Whoever listens to me will dwell safely and will be secure without fear of evil. For Wendy and all of us, this is Pat Robertson. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.